You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston, your home for uncensored news and underground music since 2011.
All right, welcome to Live Free, Think Free. It's been a minute. We're glad to be here. We got a totally packed episode with music, lots of different stories, lots of catching up to do. So I'm glad to see people tuning in on the various networks and such. Also want to remind everybody that you can bookmark or whatever you want the HoustonFreeThinkers.com, where all these stories are and articles and more are uploaded for you to, basically get into deeper than we might be able to in our limited hour to hour and a half show. So yeah, how you doing, Derrick?
I'm doing good. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate everybody's patience for the first attempt with the technicals.
Fun audio stuff and tech issues. But yeah, we're happy. Like Micah said, we got a packed show. We got some local news starting in Houston. We've got news about the World Health Organization and their pandemic treaty, and the World Health Organization working with the European Commission to roll out, and get this, it's 2023 and they're trying to roll out a digital COVID vaccine passport. And much more to cover in the next hour or so. I want to remind you, as Micah said, our website is theconsciousresistance.com. Let me go ahead and show that on screen for those who are watching, whether you're watching on Odyssey, Rockfin, Facebook, YouTube, or listening later on Spotify or BitChute. We appreciate you. Our website is thehoustonfreethinkers.com. And as Micah said, we post all the stories from our links, everything we're going to cover here in the next little bit. And I want to start, Micah, maybe you got something to mention. I want to mention an upcoming event in Houston. You know, the show has grown so much since 2011 when we first started. We're still based in Houston largely, and we do talk about Houston and Texas issues. We try to relate that to the bigger picture. We talk about international issues, but Houston is where our heart is, and so we often would report and share upcoming events and shows and things that you might want to get into if you're in Houston, as well as even if you don't live in Houston, something that if it sounds cool, maybe you want to start it in your community. So with that in mind, I want to share about a show coming up in 3 weeks from now. If for anybody who is in Houston or wants to come to Houston, it's being organized by Visionary Noise, which is a booking company that Mike is involved with and that I help out with not too often, and as also being promoted by my campaign for mayor. We're calling it Free the City, which is actually random community bit of info. Remember this, Micah? That's the name of, I think, 2 shows we did back in the day that we use that name, Free the City. So it's called Free the City, an afternoon of music and liberation over in the 3rd Ward at Axelrad off 1517 Alabama Street. For those who know Axelrad, it's always a popular place on the weekends, and even though it's really hot in Houston, I'm sure there's going to be people hanging out on an afternoon at Axelrad July 9th. And we have 3 different performers that afternoon. One band that I've only really recently got to know, they're called Tsunami Force. They describe themselves like reggae, roots, dance hall. Really cool. Awesome. I know the bass player, really talented, and they seem to be a really great act. They perform at Discovery Green and other places around Houston. And then Party Mouth, who is, I think they might call themselves pop punk, something in that genre and in that slab of music there. And they're going to be bringing the energy. I'm excited for that. And I'll also be performing my music under the name 33, which is hip hop. And I think some of you heard it here on the show. Maybe we'll play some in the next couple of weeks. You can hear about that. But again, this is called Free the City, happening July 9th off Alabama Street at Axelrad. Come hang out with us. Come learn more about why we're getting together and meet some new people. And I hope you can make it too, Micah. I'll be there sweating in person.
Yeah, it's a fun place. There's air conditioning. There's outside fans. There's games. So there's a lot going on there if you haven't been. And if you have been, then you know what we're talking about. Yeah, for sure. And I guess I'll shout out another event, and you can find out about on the Visionary Noise Facebook or any other social media that's coming up. A benefit for a local film that's being made called Me, Rihanna, E.L. Ray. It's a film being made by an individual who used to run Alternative Scream and has worked, getting music, local music, like we do at KPFT or at Live Free, Think Free, and have done on every station we've ever been on, getting local and underground music out. This gentleman's also been doing that. Our friend Jeremy, who has that little intro part to our show, will be performing, supporting the local filmmaker. And this actually will be filmed, or parts of the show will be videoed, and it'll be out on cable television in July. So you'll hear more about it as we go on. And there's a lot more acts on there than just he. But we just heard about this, getting the word out on this episode, and it's coming up soon. It's a Saturday, June 24th, over on Canal Street in just the east end of downtown. So come out, get on video, be on TV. I know I'll be there, and so we got a lot of good stuff going on. That's for sure. So let us know about your events. We don't just cover music events. We also talk about art, poetry, and film events, etc., activism. So no doubt. And I know we got a lot of people not in Houston, but we do want to let people know that there can be people who cover what's going on in their city, in their neighborhood for a long time, and not just like we are here in Houston, but also like the people we're talking about from here and some of the music we share. So appreciate your patience if you're not from Houston.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that again, like whether you're from Houston or not, I do think getting involved locally is important. And this is something that has been an integral part to this show since we started 2011, which is also around the time when I started having my wake up experiences, sometimes put, really just getting involved in activism in 2010, around that time, meeting Micah. And my specific efforts of activism, obviously it had to do with the internet and spreading information online, but it was always very much focused locally. What could I do in my own backyard? How could I get involved in Houston? And I just want to say that that's something that I've realized over the years is kind of unique, that there are many activists out there, even people who might be content creators, journalists, online commentators, whatever you want to call them, who have sizable followings but have no local connection. So they could have 100,000 plus people listening to them, but if they were to go into their own backyard and say, hey, I want to organize something good in my community, nobody would really know who they were. And so when I've seen that happen over the years, I've just been grateful that we've always had a local presence. So I do think that's important. Again, whether you live in Houston or not, the issues that we talk about, the concerns that we express, try to think how you can approach them on a local level. What can you do in your own backyard? If if what we're talking about in Houston, you're like, okay, I don't live there, but is that same issue, that same concern happening in your area, and how can you approach that? I think that's one way to look at this. So I just want to mention that.
Definitely. And I know some of the events are less that way than the other things, but some of these artists and musicians and events have helped us to survive a dozen years on various radio stations and more. So we want to make sure we give credit where credit is due and give them their opportunity as part of our show. But yeah, let's move on and talk about what's going on.
Well, I want to start locally, and I do want to mention a little bit about the mayor race. I don't think there's any conflict of mentioning. I've mentioned before that I'm running for mayor of Houston, but this show is never going to become like a promotion of that. But I just want to mention that, so anybody who is not aware. And so I'm following the mayor race pretty closely, obviously as somebody that's involved in it and did this in 2019. Really, Micah was there. It started out as a joke of watching the current mayor flip out because somebody called him by his first name and didn't call him mayor. And it sort of was just like, wow, this guy thinks he's somebody special. Somebody should run for the nobodies. And that was really the beginning of, headphones. It was really the beginning of this idea that did evolve into a serious effort at mayor campaign. Not that I really had any high hopes of winning, but I did want to make an effort to really be a part of the conversation. So with all that said, I'm following the day-to-day what's going on. And there's something I think worth reporting, a couple of things from the angle that we usually take, which is looking for corruption. So yeah, the big news of the day is Lina Hidalgo, a local politician for those who don't know. You might know her even if you're not from the Houston area because she has gained national attention with being on CNN and other places throughout the COVID-19 panic. For her role, namely, there was two things. There was one where she stood up against Governor Greg Abbott, who I'm no fan of, but he said that local bodies couldn't initiate mass campaigns. And so her and the current mayor said, oh, we're going to have necessary civil disobedience. And they tried to go ahead and push as much sort of restrictions and COVID mandates as they could. And that was one of her big things. And then, of course, just in general, like, look at how great she's doing Harris County during COVID. She's a rising young Latina star. And there's a pretty good expose on her and some of the people behind her campaign. The Arnold Foundation, one of the richest billionaire families in Houston, and just the way that their organizations guided her lockdown policy, basically. So that's a little background on her. And today she announces that she is endorsing or going to endorse. I don't think she's officially done it yet, but it's going to happen tomorrow. Or it may have happened, by the end of today. This was early in the morning. And she was said to endorse Sheila Jackson Lee, who again is a Democratic congresswoman, originally from Houston, based in Texas, been around for 30 years, like the other career politicians running for mayor. She's running. She's got all kinds of problems with her. So you got these two problematic people deeply tied to the Democratic Party, one a rising star, one been around for 30 years, partnering together. And yeah, so I mean, that's kind of just, oh, this is the sort of thing the local media reports. This is, I guess, where I wanted to go with this is, as somebody who's part of the race and following it, I notice like when these little things happen, or when somebody like Tony Busby, who's just a local character who ran in the last election, says, "Oh, I'm thinking about running it." He's got millions of dollars, so they automatically see him as a legit candidate, or at least a potentially legit candidate, because they report on it like it's news, and it's really just, here's a local guy who's a lawyer who seems to have no real political interest, and then just kind of flirts with the idea of, oh, I think I might jump in, guys. And because he's got the money, it becomes news. Then you have reports like this and others where they're talking about the mayoral race when they do mention it, which is very rare, and they say that here's the 6-7 candidates who are running, the principal candidates, the main candidates, the serious candidates. There's 13 people that I know who have filed for treasurer, and in a couple of weeks will be filling out the paperwork, or you can begin to fill out the paperwork to be actually placed on the ballot when you become actually official. And the media's already made up its mind based on how they're reporting of who these serious candidates are. And part of it comes from Houston Public Media. They did a report this week, and I actually emailed them and said, hey, just to let you know, there's 13 people running, and here's info about them. Here's my info as well. I'm running. I got one response and just sort of said, oh, thanks for mentioning it. And the next day on air, they didn't mention me by name, but they did said they want to acknowledge there's more candidates running, but essentially just said there's not enough time to get to all these people. Some people aren't polling. Some people don't have name recognition. They don't have infrastructure. They don't have money. They're not a serious contender, so there's really no reason to mention them. It's kind of the approach they're taking. So that's just like, I want to mention that this is my problem with how local media, not just in case of my personal interest in this, but this is the way that they shape the narrative, Micah, the kind of thing that we've talked about for years. And maybe this is obvious, but I think people are used to seeing like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, national level corporate media, and understanding that. But how often do they really think my local news, my local public access radio or TV is pushing certain narratives or is shaping the conversation? In this, it's very subtle. It's just not telling people the amount of people who are actually running, and thereby creating a perception that those are the only people that, or at least those are the only people that matter and are noteworthy. And then at the same time, they say, well, it's like this, they don't want to report on these lesser known candidates, but in order for people to grow, obviously you have your own efforts to do that, but the media is part of that. So I see it as really dishonest, but I did want to also point, to give it one positive note, that there is
tend to be a representation of or by or for the people, right? The media outlet, they can say, yeah, we ain't got time for it, but then even if it's something as independent as we'd like to think our local public media is, I think about it also that like some people they believe that, right? So they never believe an independent could ever win. They never believe any of that stuff. So then they're floored when it happens. I don't know. Maybe they like the big parties and fundraisers that people like Tony Busby or whoever can afford, and they want to make sure they keep getting invited, to the swanky, hotels and such. I don't
think
know.
that's part of it. I mean, I think there's some element of the ego and people wanting to be involved, but in this level, and for anybody who's interested, I just put out a video. You can find it at derrickbroze.com. And my other channels, if you follow me elsewhere. And it's just a highlight of that report that I just talked about from Houston Public Media. And it's frustrating that on mainstream radio in this city, you can have this political scientist, Mark Jones from Rice University, another woman from University of Houston, just saying, frankly, we just don't have time for some of these people who are not going to be mayor, and they're not serious. And even at one point said they really shouldn't even be there. He said, well, they can be there because they can run, they can do what they want, of course, but they're really just kind of a distraction. They're really not, and it's like they're deciding themselves, and again, shaping that narrative for people. And so I think that some people need to understand that does happen on the local level with elections or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of repeating the same tired philosophy, So I hope people can see through it in their local. Oh, 10.
Well, I did want to. Yeah, I wanted
to. I forgot where it was, but it went by my feed, and it wasn't from one of your sources. So I was
Yeah, no,
like, hey,
I mean, the thing is, if you go to like the Wikipedia page for the Houston mayoral race, it lists all the people who filled out the paperwork and stuff, and that, so it's like, okay, that resource is there. There's been some outlets, but I did want to acknowledge this one that is fairly a new outlet in Houston, and I have no connection to them, so if they end up being really horrible, then, don't take this as a recommendation. They've only been around for a couple months, but the way they describe themselves and the way they see themselves, they're nonpartisan, they're nonprofit journalism. So there are different outlets like this, and these occasionally do actual journalism that doesn't get stuck in kind of the culture wars and the wedge issues and all that kind of stuff. They are funded by that same and by many groups, but including that Arnold Foundation that I mentioned that is funding Lena Hidalgo. So we'll see where that goes. But they did reach out to me, and I think they made a genuine effort to reach out to most of the candidates. They say 10 here. Like I said, I do think there's 13. Maybe they couldn't get in touch with everybody. But this is just a list of the 10 candidates that they've mentioned. They invited us to come in and get a headshot, and they're saying they're going to have continuing coverage, not just a one piece, one time, here's a mayor race, here's what you need to know, move on, or here's the 5 candidates running, like, I've seen before. They seem to have an interest in actually following the race. And so I think anybody looking for some good independent, I'll let you judge that, but mostly nonpartisan from what I can see, check out HoustonLanding.org. They're new in Houston, and they seem like they're trying, and at least as it relates to this issue.
what about that photo placement there, Derek? What do you think about that? Right there in the center. I mean, could you ask for better photo placement? I mean, just
You know what? Several people have said that. They're like, dude, they put you right in the middle of the thing, and I'm the first person listed. And I don't know if it's by alphabetical order. It does appear to be alphabetical order, so that's probably just my luck, right? But yeah, they put me in the middle. Not a bad place to be. Square in the middle. And I will say, as far as like my personal perspective, like I didn't get called a conspiracy theorist. These aren't really long. They reached out and said, hey, what are the main 2 issues you want to promote? And so I told him that, and he took my words and kind of rewrote them into his words. And then they linked to my website. It's nothing super in depth. This is just the beginning. But like I said, they're inviting all of us to come for like one-on-one interviews. I'm expecting there'll be more subsequent reports where we'll learn more, even more in depth. And he was true to what I told him. I thought it was interesting, and this is probably going to be the most controversial part of the campaign I'm running as it grows this summer. But he put defending health freedom, and he put that in quotes, health freedom in the wake of Houston's COVID response is Broze's second campaign pillar. He criticized the city's COVID vaccine requirement for employees and the decision to allow children to be vaccinated against COVID. So again, though, not called crazy, not called conspiracy theorist. So from my perspective, it's a win.
undoubtedly.
Yeah, cool. Well, I just wanted to cover that, and mainly just to, like I said, if you're following the mayoral race in Houston, I think it's not an inconsequential thing. It's the 4th largest city in the U.S. 200,000 people are voting. I'm not here to tell you to vote. I don't think it's going to fix anything per se. It could be rigged. I don't know, but I'm at least trying to use it to highlight how that corruption, how deep it extends, and use the soapbox. We're starting to get to the point of forums and TV interviews and radio interviews, and I'm planning to use that as loudly as possible the message that I think needs to be shared at this crazy time in our world. So yeah, anyways, we'll see where it all goes. Thanks guys for entertaining that conversation there. Micah, did you see this one? This is again another Harris County, Houston area story, but it relates everywhere, I think, right?
Yeah, it relates everywhere. I saw that one. I actually took a picture of it on the physical paper at like a CVS or some Walgreens or somewhere. And I didn't know which one of us put that in there. So it's interesting. And I think we should get into it. Do you want to lead the way?
Yeah, so there's this one and another one that I'll mention. I don't think I have it pulled up, that are just kind of interesting, and I feel like there's more to them. So we'll see what we get out of this, because on the surface, obviously, this is going to appeal to a lot of people. So it says here, for people who are listening and not watching, Harris County, which is the county that Houston is in, to unveil $500 guaranteed income program for struggling families. And I guess the program's called Uplift Harris, and it says aims to help residents who are battling with financial instability. This was reported just about 10 days ago. So just this month, earlier in June, Harris County officials announced a pilot program dubbed Uplift Harris that would give low-income residents $500 a month of guaranteed income for up to 18 months to address poverty in the region. According to officials, the $500 stipends are going to come from federal money as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, from a $20.5 million program operated by the Harris County Public Health Department. And This was approved at the time. It says if approved, but it was approved. The state's largest county would be Harris County. Now becomes the first in Texas to test a program and to add its name to a list of other metro areas, including Cook County, which represents Chicago, as well as Los Angeles County, that are trying these kind of programs. So it's a trend that seems to be growing in major cities. According to Precinct 1 Commissioner Rodney Ellis, they're saying 1,500 families who live 200% below the federal poverty line, particularly a household with a total of $60,000 for a family of 4 and $29,000 for a single individual, are eligible to start to apply for the program, which is going to start around September. So again, 200% below the federal poverty line, which I thought was $20,000. Maybe it's higher now, I guess, but either way, that says $29,000 for a person, $60,000 for a family of 4. You can apply, and this is 1,500 families. To get $500 a month, which really, I mean, if you're a family of 4, I guess anything helps, right? But $500 is not a whole lot. Not that I'm saying it should be more. Just saying, like, with inflation and everything, that's not a lot of money.
Well, so at their annual, because
yeah,
$500 a month would be $6,000 over the year. They make $60,000. That's 10% extra. Just boom.
if you use it wisely, I mean, you could do something with it. All right. I mean, but I think that, well, we'll talk about that in a second. Let's get some more details. Say it's coming from federal grant money, COVID money. So here it said that Harris County Public Health Director Barbie Robinson said the money distribution would happen in 2 groups. The first is randomly selecting 1,200 families in the county's poorest areas, and then selecting 200 to 400 families in the department's Access program, which already services vulnerable residents. So 200 to 400 families in one group, and then 1,200 families randomly selected. And she said, Ellis said, the commissioner said, despite our region's vast prosperity in Harris County, we also face rampant income inequality. Decades of neglect, inequality, and discrimination have financially destabilized generations of Harris County families, perpetuating poverty and creating unfair barriers to prosperity. So it goes on, there's some details about Harris County, Houston residents. Apparently one study found that 40% of people responding from 2,000 people said they couldn't afford a $400 unexpected expense, such as a medical bill or a car repair. And when you break that down, according to this, and I'm not vouching for its accuracy, but just according to this, says that 70% of those identified as Black fitness category couldn't afford a $400 expense, and 50% were Latino with same concerns. I think that's unfortunately probably pretty normal for a lot of people. Maybe not for everybody, obviously, but some people are doing pretty good. But there's definitely a lot of people I would say I probably know who would at least have a difficult time with the random unexpected $400 expense. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this, Micah, in general? The fact it's coming from the Fed money and just amounts and just
okay. It's in principle, I don't agree with it. But in principle, the money that's going to corporations and the wars from taking like that, it's so much larger that it's hard to, really want to get in the way of, people getting some help. But that being said, I've come in the situation where $400 would make a world of difference if I had a bill all of a sudden. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that out of those 2,000 people who were polled, that there weren't some people there that could have been a little bit more financially responsible for themselves, like I should be also at times, so that I have that money. I'm not trying to say that people don't need help. It's a sticky subject to talk about, because nowadays, if you act like, we should take these things as anything more than a surface, philanthropic effort or altruistic, goodness, just like a bear waiting to be consumed, it seems like you dislike or, but at the same time, there's that whole thing about, lifting people up. And I'm not sure that just giving people money lifts them up. That's hard to say, right? And like I said, there's way worse things that the government's doing with money to a much greater extent for me to pick this as the first thing I'd go to cut based on principle. But like you said, it's happening everywhere. And, where will it stop now? Will every time, we go to the trial to get this bailout money and this government stimulus money, will every time now another justification for these people to get it? And I think I saw Lena Hidalgo's face right there. That's not a campaign thing or nothing either, right? So I think I think those things add up to, some real compromising of principles if you believe in, a free people, because this money has to be taken from somewhere. How much good is it doing? Is it all voluntary? Are we all just saying, heck, I'll throw in $5? That'd be a whole different thing. And like I said, in the grand scheme of things, it's tiny. So I hate to make a big deal about it, but I'm reiterating the same point again. So what do you think, Derrick? I mean, obviously some of these people need help.
Am I still coming through okay? My audio was acting up a little weird. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good assessment there that I would probably go with. And I think this is another example to me of issues that are not exactly black and white. Because, yeah, on principle, I don't think, you know, the stolen money from people via involuntary taxation should just be redistributed. I think that's, I have issues with that already, right? But at the same time, you're also, you point out that, like, yeah, they're giving millions, billions, not even millions anymore, billions and trillions to war, to surveillance, to all kinds of horrible stuff, to study ridiculous things. I mean, we could, people have made lists of all the ridiculous expenses and waste in various government bills, right? So much more, and this is just $500 to 1,200 families, and then I think it said 200 to 400 other families. So like less than 2,000 families are going to get $500 each a month for a year and a half. I don't think it's the biggest crime out there. Now, my concern, and I guess thought, and again, understanding this is nuanced and not black and white, is are programs like this, and I would argue the answer is yes, with LA, Chicago, and now Houston and other cities testing this out, are these just working their way towards universal basic income, ideas like that. So for those just joining us, we were discussing a program in Harris County where Houston's based, and they're talking about a program to help the lowest income. Like, you have to be 200% below the federal poverty line, and you can apply starting September to get $500 a month for 18 months. And now we're the thought is something like that leading towards, or helping contribute towards the idea of a universal basic income. And then maybe for other people who haven't thought this through, what's wrong with the universal basic income? Like, what do you think about that, Micah? If somebody sees this and hears this, what issues would you take with that?
Well, now I'll say also that they'll have, a list of all the applicants and how few they were able to serve. Right. We're going to hear that next, right? The next time we come around to, some stimulus money because of some thing we haven't thought of yet because, COVID is kind of played. But yeah, whatever the next round of that is, I think that they'll just say, during the COVID, we had over 5 billion applicants. There's only 500,000 or whatever it is, but we had all these applicants, and we could only take care of so much. And I think it'll just continue. It's one of those slippery slopes once you open the door to it. And of course, these people are going to vote for the politicians you see leading the charge on this, and that's not to be considered any sort of buying of votes or anything. So I think that's a serious thing. And I do think it's a serious thing when you think about universal basic income, because I think that it truly affects how humans relate to each other. Nobody wants to go to work, but what is going to be the purpose of anybody doing anything? What's going to be the purpose of a medium of exchange even? I'm not sure of a world with universal basic income. So that goes a little bit farther than this. But I do think it's, and that's one of the reasons I took a photo of it with my cell phone when I saw it on the front page of the Houston Chronicle, is because it smacks of it. It's yet another one of these, welfare warfare state policies that's just starting to creep in. You know how it is. And the people there on that paper, they're going to support it. They're going to support it coming again and again in all these different ways, So, yeah, that's what I think about it. But like I said, I oppose it on principle, but there's so many corrupt, horrible things to go on about that this one seems trite. And at least some people that live near me are getting some help. I wouldn't vote for it. I wouldn't approve it if I was in office, but at the same time, there's so much
bigger concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and take a quick break, guys. Everybody, we'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll put the question back on the screen real quick. Do you support universal basic income programs, or even in the case of this program in Harris County, short term, like 18 months, government funding programs. This case coming from federal money, taxpayer money, of course. Let us know in the comments wherever you're listening, and we'd love to share that when we get back. We're going to take a quick music break. This is actually from Party Mouth, previously known as Pajama Party, who is performing at the show we were talking about earlier in the show. It'll be July 9th at Axelrad in Houston. Check it out. We'll be right back, and we're going to continue the conversation with the AI, World Health Organization, a lot of more fun stuff, so stay tuned. Be right back on Live Free, Think Free.
Waves cry, doing whole community, like the flutters from a sailor's heart is this loving and singing. It's for the first and the last, words to miss the stars. They cut yours so clearly, but she clings to each one dearly. Oh, you're my life, I'm your lighthouse, you're the fire inside of me. Don't burn out, and go down after all these heavy clouds you fade away. Sun will shine upon your face. When I'm gone, I'm dreaming of your face. Be my mistress, but I'm afraid to leave that place. Anything goes. Nobody knows how hard it makes you say I'm very slow. Oh, you're my light, I'm your lighthouse, you're the fire inside of me. Don't burn out, then go down after all these heavy clouds will fade away. Sun will shine upon your face. You're my map, I'm your key. You're the waves finding me. So let's go home. Never alone. Nothing's ever set in stone, so take my hand. Here we go. Here we go. Don't let go. Here we go. Here we go. Don't let go. Don't let go.
All right, welcome back. Yeah, that was fun. Pajama Party, well, previously known as Pajama Party, now called Party Mouth, and that song was called Waves. You can find that on everywhere you listen to music, I'm sure. Search Pajama Party for that, now called Party Mouth. All right, let's go ahead and jump forward, guys. We got some more to cover. I want to pick up the conversation a little bit, at least for a few moments, Mike. I know we got some more articles to pull up, but where we left off 2 weeks ago when we had a show talking about universal basic income, which we just discussed, where we were talking about AI, we were talking about deep fakes, and we were really kind of asking the question about, like, is you know, the age is here, the age of AI, deep fakes, etc. Things are happening. We gave several examples of, you know, people being scammed and just different ways that the real world is being impacted, and of course asking how does this technology maybe differ from things we've seen in the past. And Micah, you offer up about that. I'm interested in come from on either end, and just, you know, pointing out that we've had technologies in the past which were revolutionary and disruptive, but, you know, things find a way. So I want to get to that in just a moment, but there's a couple of clips we got here, or comments from Rockfin, from Caroline. She says, a lot of the people are the working poor. They have no freedom. They're chained to poverty wages. She also adds, UBI is a government subsidy for low wages. We're subsidizing so that corporations can keep more profit. So I think that's an interesting way to look at that, for sure. So yeah, but what, you know, so before we get into our thoughts, Micah, and pick back up the AI conversation, I wanted to play a clip that I found today. This is from Yuval Harari, who has become infamous, I think, in many circles because he's the guy who's an advisor to Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. He said that humans are hackable animals, and that, you know, AI is going to become a god, and just lots of controversial things in some areas. And he was speaking recently at this
Become a god.
Yeah, he thinks he's gonna become a god. He was speaking at this, what is it called, Frontiers Summit, recently, and I want to play just a 4-minute clip. because it sort of picks up where we were talking about, Micah. And again, we can talk about why somebody like him, who's very much supports AI, might be warning about AI. We touched on this a little bit before. It seems like the big tech companies are trying to call for regulation, so of course they can regulate themselves and push out any other potential competitors like open source AI, which potentially could do good. So we'll put all that aside. This is Yuval Harari speaking just recently at the Frontier Summit about AI, and just he says a few interesting things. So I want to get your thoughts, Micah, and everybody else listening. Check this out.
And remember that we humans, we never really have direct access to reality. We are always cocooned by culture, and we always experience reality through a cultural prism. Our political views are shaped by the stories of journalists and by the anecdotes of friends. Our sexual preferences are tweaked by movies and fairy tales. Even the way that we walk and breathe is subtly nudged by cultural traditions. Now, previously, this cultural cocoon was always woven by other human beings. Previous tools like printing presses or radios or televisions, they helped to spread the cultural ideas and creations of humans, but they could never create something new by themselves. A printing press cannot create a new book. It's always done by a human. AI is fundamentally different from printing presses, from radios, from every previous invention in history, because it can create completely new ideas. It can create a new culture. And the big question is, what will it be like to experience reality through a prism produced by a non-human intelligence, by an alien intelligence? Now, in the first few years, AI will probably largely imitate the prototypes, the human prototypes that fed it in its infancy. But with each passing year, AI culture will boldly go where no human has gone before. So for thousands of years, we humans basically lived inside the dreams and fantasies of other humans. We have worshipped gods, we pursued ideals of beauty, we dedicated our lives to causes that originated in the imagination of some human poet or prophet or politician. Soon, we might find ourselves living inside the dreams and fantasies of an alien intelligence. And the danger that this poses, or the potential danger, it also has positive potential, but the dangers this poses are fundamental, very, very different from everything or most of the things imagined in science fiction movies and books. Previously, people have mostly feared the physical threat that intelligent machines pose. So the Terminator depicted robots running in the streets and shooting people. The Matrix assumed that to gain total control of human society, AI would first need to get physical control of our brains and directly connect our brains to the computer network. But this is wrong. Simply by gaining mastery of human language, AI has all it needs in order to cocoon us in a matrix-like world of illusions. Contrary to what some conspiracy theories assume, you don't really need to implant chips in people's brains in order to control them or to manipulate them. For thousands of years, prophets and poets and politicians have used language and storytelling in order to manipulate and to control people and to reshape society. Now AI is likely to be able to do it. And once it can do that, it doesn't need to send killer robots to shoot us. It can get humans to pull the trigger if it really needs to.
Yep. That was interesting. All right. Welcome back. That was interesting.
What do you think about that, Micah? Just some of the things he shared there. I know he shared a lot.
Well, I think we're a little ways, I'm a layman. I don't know about computer programming much, and I don't know about AI except from trying to stumble it up, like the Bing AI. You can stumble it up pretty quickly. So all kinds of problems. I think about the people on the other end trying to make it smarter, to answer our asinine questions. Uh, but yeah, I don't know this thing about its dreams and fantasies that the gentleman referred to. That troubled me a little bit because, you know, we're not talking about intelligence. We're talking about artificial intelligence. I'm not exactly sure that all the capacities of human intelligence this logic chopping machine has. Uh, I'm not sure, because like I said, I'm a layman in this. But I'd also know, and maybe we talked about it last time, but that just recently some lawyers wanted to prevent being sanctioned because a chat GPT generated brief of theirs contained fictitious cases. Something that a lawyer obviously can't do. He signed his name that all this is true and verified and all this type of stuff. So any lawyer with their salt, and the fact that they're sitting here asking to not be sanctioned for this mistake, I think that says a lot. I think the law, where it comes down on that stuff, right or wrong, is going to want to hold someone responsible. So it goes back to, well, as long as that's sort of controlled by humans, there's that. But then there's also the whole thing of, well, as law becomes more and more, AI driven, and they talk about getting the humans to shoot the humans, as he did, like the AI could do that. I could do that in that mode quickly. These are miscreants. They don't have a proper Sesame credit. But I think we're a little ways from all that stuff, and I don't know why I say that. I think just seeing the clunkiness of what's being put out and the hype behind it, like it's this great solution. When it's just, I ask them all the time, tell me how you're greater than a search engine. And then it tells me how, right? And then I'm like asking for examples of it. And it finally gives up. It's like, it's just ridiculous. I don't know. I have a lot of fun. I think it'll tweak it. I did get it to admit that some cannibals were hungry, because it tries to moralize to you sometimes, different ones, and I think
it does what they call hallucinate, when it starts giving you wrong answers or it makes stuff up, like you said with the case of the lawyers, it's hallucinating. It's some weird stuff for sure, and I don't claim to be an expert in it either, and I don't want to just be a fear monger or anything like that. We try to always take a balanced approach, but I thought it was interesting mainly because, as I mentioned before, Yuval Harari's a big, he's definitely heavy on thinking AI is necessary and it's going to be an evolution. But he was here kind of, doesn't mean I trust him, of course, but it was really the way he phrased it, saying the Matrix got it wrong and Terminator got it wrong because they're thinking about physical machines coming after you. And the Matrix thought that, they'll have to, get us all in trap first. And he's like, we don't have to, the conspiracy theorists think you have to get a brain chip in people's mind to control them. No, that's not true. And he talked about cocooning us off, where I could see, if AI, which I think this is the direction it's going for better or worse, that it is like the personal assistant, not just the Google, but it becomes like the personality. Like we mentioned before, there was a chat GPT integration with Snapchat, and on there kids can give it an avatar, they can rename it and call it, hey buddy, tell me this, and it talks to them and whatever. And the more it gets that way in physical representations, people will see it as a friend or an ally or whatever. And so he kind of, I think, was, well, at least what I got from it is describing that in a way that it becomes even more atomized, I guess, and then we get cocooned off into different realities and stuff, and which, I mean, maybe that's humanity's next evolution.
There's a couple other things I thought about on there. He began with, saying how we never know reality because of the cocoon. And in one breath, I get it. And then in another breath, I don't, because all these people's stories and the fact that people tell you these stories is part of reality. The fact, and he talks about the poets influencing, manipulating people, and the religious and all the writers, etc., through history. So I get what we're saying about AI being, kind of self-generative in a way, but wasn't it just a human being that kind of put this whole thing in motion to begin with? And wouldn't he just be, if it was this guy's, wildest fantasy of it being, wouldn't it just still be that guy created a more powerful cocoon? I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I don't know what's right either. Of course, we're about to find out in the coming years. But I think his argument was that, yeah, in the first couple generations, the AI will just mimic what it was, created or what it was taught through its original creators. But then as it gets smarter and faster and is evolving, that within, I don't know, he didn't give a real timeline, but generations from the original one, that it will then be capable of creating its own thoughts or whatever you want to call that,
But the whole
calculations.
ability to do that, to process to that direction, was set in motion by a what? A human. Even
Yeah.
if the human has let go of the machine and it's off, being perpetual motion or something. So I
I
think,
think we'll be fine as long as they don't put them in those robot dogs. If they don't start putting
yeah,
people in those robot dogs.
you just got to try to stump it with questions while it's telling you to go home in the park or whatever.
What's the meaning of life? And it's like, yeah, no, those things really do scare me. But all right, guys, let's move to our next story. We appreciate everybody who's listening. Oh, I do want to share one more comment from the Erie Fairy, who's always tuning in. Appreciate the shares and everything. I can see how confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance can grow greater with AI infiltrating our lives more and more into virtual reality and augmented reality. Which, speaking of augmented reality, we did see and I don't know if it's going to take off. I don't think the world's ready for it. But Apple, at the recent big conference, like a week or two ago, announced the latest iPhone, but also their next kind of model, I guess, that they're trying to bring to the world. And it's called Apple Vision Pro. And it's basically a set of augmented reality goggles. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, I'll show a little real quick on screen. I don't have a model of it. I haven't used it. I will admit I played a little bit with my nieces and nephews. They have the Oculus thing with some games and stuff like that. It's pretty weird for me personally. But so this is Apple's new bet, and this is part of the push towards augmented reality. And they do a video you can watch where it kind of showcases it. And it's weird because I don't know if they just expect people to be wearing those all the time. Here, let's just play it. Maybe you can just look at it. But the point is, they show in their clip that like a guy at home with his kids, and he's got the goggles on, and he's got a heads-up display of answering calls and checking messages while he's kicking the soccer ball to the kid, and answering a message, and you just respond. But I guess again, the idea is, do you just wear it all the time? Because it would seem like if you're not wearing it and you're getting a phone call or you're near the laptop, would you really feel the need to put this on? I don't know. I mean, like I said, so far attempts. I do think we're headed. There's people pushing us towards an augmented reality future. This is what Klaus Schwab calls the fourth industrial revolution. It's part of the Great Reset, etc. But it does seem like it's not. It hasn't really caught on thus far. Like Google did Google Glass 10 years ago when they tried to release their glasses that had a heads-up display on it, and it never took off. So I don't know if people are ready for this. What do you think, Micah? You wearing them? You want one of these for $3,000?
Not for 3,000. What's it do? Answers the phone? Heck, I don't know. I think, like you said, I'd check it out just to see what it did, but I don't think I would be interested in having it. I mean, I don't know. I have a computer. I mean, is it just like that? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what kind of world we're going to be in the future. Will you not even be able to have a computer? In some countries like the Philippines, their phone is practically their computer. So I don't know. It depends on context. But yeah, I see it as being okay for being for games or something, but I don't.
Yeah, I could see that application. They tried to show. I encourage you to look up the video after the show just to check it out. It's like a minute long because again,
when you're a kid,
they show people living their daily life, not just oh, this is the latest device to get on your PlayStation. This is part of your life, and that's the whole thing. They change from scene to scene. Oh, a young hip-looking dad doing work, and he looks like Tom Cruise from Minority Report, and he kicks the soccer ball to the sun, and it changes to somebody else at the office, and they're using it, and so it definitely seems like they plan for this to be a daily functional device. We'll see.
I don't know. I see people wearing their earpiece all over the place. Maybe there'll be a certain group of them that's wearing that. I don't see myself being one of those.
Me either. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump forward to a couple more stories here. These are just these next three stories, and I'm going to blast through them fairly fast. I mean, we'll hit the finer points, and Micah, please feel free to interject at any point. But I just wanted to share some of these because since we haven't had a show in 2 weeks, these next three come from articles that I wrote this week, last week, and the week before for The Last American Vagabond. And they have kind of become perennial issues on this show as we follow the still continuing fallout of the COVID-19 panic and the lockdowns and the authoritarian response, which I would say never forget too, that we saw all around the world, and kids being put in masks and bubbles in their heads and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's not over, and I recognize that there's still, some implications to come. This article I titled "World Health Organization Concludes 76th Assembly as Debate Over the Pandemic Treaty Rages On." And this was late May when the World Health Organization, they gathered for their 76th yearly assembly. And although the so-called pandemic treaty or the pandemic accord was not on the official agenda, it was being discussed either way. You had U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra, who was there speaking to journalists, and this is a quote from him. He says, "I think we'll get an accord in place if everyone realizes that our window before this next pandemic, this next health threat, is probably not far away." So take that how you will. And that's coming from this U.S. Health Secretary here speaking at the World Health Organization as they discussed this. And so they discussed a number of issues, including where we're going to go next. And the head of the World Health Organization, the so-called Director General Tedros, he said that this is a generational opportunity to negotiate this strong accord, and this moment must be seized. Quote, "We are the generation that lived through the COVID-19 panic, so we must be the generation that learns the lessons it taught us and make the changes to keep future generations safer." And then you had another official who was there from an NGO saying that the treaty was weak and it needed to be stronger. "Voluntary measures are not good enough," he was quoted as stating. So direct evidence that some people who are debating this so-called pandemic treaty are really calling for the World Health Organization to have supranational powers to, actually say, "Hey, U.S., we've declared this a pandemic, and all of our member states must go along with the following measures or face sanctions," and things like that. That's really what this is about. And so there are people saying this is an attempt to erode national sovereignty, and not just crazy people on the internet. And I mean that facetiously. I think people have legit reasons to worry about this, despite the fact that in March, the World Health Organization Director Tedros said that it was quite simply false and fake news, and quote, no country will cede any sovereignty to the World Health Organization. So it came straight from him, if you want to believe that. But in mid-May, there was I'd never heard of this, Micah.
I think it's just like their word, they're saying they're not ceding sovereignty. You know what I mean? They'll say that your governors, your representatives chose it, like every treaty that.
Yeah, this was voted on. What are you talking about? We didn't take anything. So I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I'd never, until I found this when I was researching this, the Sovereignty Coalition. Don't know much about them, what they represent, but I thought it was interesting because they were actually doing something good here, whatever they normally represent. They held a press conference in mid-May, the Sovereignty Coalition, which is, I think, pretty much all Republicans, members of the U.S. House, and they held a press conference speaking out about the dangers of the pandemic treaty and specifically the threat that they say it poses to nation states. One of their more well-known members is Lauren Boebert of Colorado. She said, quote, "This is not about public health. The World Health Organization made it clear they censor anyone who does not agree with their agenda to control every aspect of people's lives. They want total control over vaccinations, digitization of health records, and your travel." And I can say that statement, the first half, is definitely true. I was censored in fall of 2020 and deleted off YouTube when I was given my punishment, it said that this video, which was my final strike, did not align with World Health Organization policy. So if you say something that the World Health Organization says is false or misinformation, disinformation, you guys lived through it. You could be deleted off the internet. And the Sovereignty Coalition said that the WHO is a, quote, supranational UN agency that is effectively controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. They say that the influence of the CCP is evident because Dr. Tedros is, quote, advancing the CCP's interests and bringing about a post-constitutional America and global governance dominated by the party. And I will say, look, whether or not you want to think that that's a totally accurate statement, controlled by the CCP, the fact is that behind the U.S. and then the number two state funder of the World Health Organization is China, and then right after that, the biggest non-state funder is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So there is a Chinese government connection to the WHO through the funding, and right there with the U.S. as well.
Real soon, it's on the agenda. I got an article about it. We might not get to it this episode, but Bill's going to go meet with the president of China, Bill Gates is.
I saw that. Yeah, so there's some strong Chinese connections going on here. So the Sovereignty Coalition is just, they're another organization bringing awareness of this. And I also found there's a UK member of Parliament, Andrew Bridgen, who said that the WHO Treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations represent a, quote, huge grab of power by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. He gave a speech in the Parliament on April 17th and said, quote, we should have a referendum because sovereignty belongs to the people. It's not ours to give away. And he also mentioned that the World Health Organization employees have diplomatic immunity and they cannot be prosecuted for potential crimes, which, if true, is pretty disturbing. You had other people coming out and speaking out. I just kind of started going through this and listing, the people speaking out against this. This is, going on, though. This is an ongoing situation because the World Health Organization is expected to finalize this treaty in May 2024. There's going to be more meetings before then as we kind of get bits and bits, but really it comes down to May 2024, a meeting that they're going to have where they will vote whatever the final language of the text comes out to be. And there is a very real possibility that it could, in some ways, give the UN, the World Health Organization, powers over national governments in the way that they respond to alleged pandemics, which is a pretty frightening idea.
I'd say it's pretty frightening.
Yeah, because that means if they say there's another pandemic, like remember the health secretary of the U.S. said, oh, we have a brief window before this next threat is coming. So if this treaty were to get signed, and then let's imagine shortly after that something were to claim to have happened, it could give the UN and some powers to dictate what national governments around the world do.
They'll send in the calculators.
Yeah, they'll send in the peacekeepers, right?
Yeah.
Wow, so pretty crazy stuff. I know many of you are following that story. Just wanted to hit that one up. Again, you can find this at thelastamericanvagabond.com. Now, to pick that up and continue with this, with some other things the World Health Organization is doing, and this is just, again, a reminder that the COVID-19 narrative or just the pandemic narrative is not maybe over and done. I do think we're seeing more and more focus on climate change and stuff, but it's all ultimately, it seems just to be about control, taking away your privacy and your liberties. This one, though, was also around early June. World Health Organization and European Commission partner for digital health was what they call it, with new COVID-19 digital certificate, right? Just when you thought it was over, like, what do you mean? I thought that things are back to quote unquote normal or a new normal, right? They announced that it's not over yet. The European Commission and the WHO announced that this partnership is going to be the beginning of a digital vaccine passport system for the world. The announcement comes after the EU had a similar certificate, digital COVID certificate, which was begun in June 2021 during the COVID panic, and it was set to expire this month, June 30th. According to the EU, they claim that there were more than 2.3 billion digital certificates issued in that time period for people who were vaccinated. And this was for people to travel across the European Union during this insane time. And the World Health Organization and their partners of the EU now say that they're basing what they learned through that EU digital COVID certificate for this new program for the World Health Organization. Dr. Tedros says the digital certificates will, quote, help people everywhere receive quality health services quickly and more effectively. And as I noted here, ironically, the European Commission and WHO say that the EU vaccine passport, that when they used it, it helped, quote, facilitate safe and free movement. Safe and free movement is not having to ask governments and show pieces of paper or digital documents to get around, but that's what they call it. So yeah, now the WHO is saying they're going to establish a global system that will, quote, help protect citizens across the world from ongoing and future health threats, including pandemics. So they're using the pandemic excuse, but it's also showing that future health threats. That means whatever the heck they say, whether it's aliens that we keep hearing more about, or a war, or terrorism, or communism, or whatever. It's all about that digital ID, getting people on these systems. The press release says that this is a continuation of an agreement signed in December 2022, and that this will, quote, enhance strategic cooperation on global health issues and bolster a robust multilateral system with the World Health Organization at its core. And when I hear things like that, multilateral, it's clear that these organizations, these institutions, there's a reason people call them globalist. And I used to kind of scoff at that when people like Alex Jones and others have been saying it forever, but I think it is accurate to or internationalist, if you will. It's what these people want. They definitely don't see value in national sovereignty, and people like Henry Kissinger and others have said it openly for decades now. And just the kind of last thing to make it clear, this is a worldwide thing, not just for the European Union. They said that this is a first building block as part of the World Health Organization's Global Digital Health Certification Network, which will develop, quote, a wide range of digital products to deliver better health for all, And they said that the COVID pandemic response taught them that there is, quote, an existing gap and continued need for a mechanism to support verification of health documents and for pandemic preparedness and continuity of care. So this is just the first building block in an institution, the GDHCN, that's going to be used for digitization of existing vaccine certificates. It says for verification of cross-border prescriptions and verification of vaccine certificates within and across international borders. And so, again, they emphasize they're building off of their experience of the regional networks of COVID vaccine certificates. So, and I also just want to add one more thing that I reported back in 2021. Somebody sent this to me, this EU document from 2019. What day, I can't remember what year exactly it was or what month it was, but it was in 2019. And this is an EU roadmap on vaccination, Q3 2029, released by the European Commission. And so Q3 2019, we never heard the word COVID-19 vaccine passports until 2020. But you look at their timeline here, and it says beginning in 2019 all the way through 2021, feasibility study for the development of a common EU vaccination card. And then in their timeline, 2022, commission proposal for a common vaccination card passport for EU citizens. And this was a roadmap from late quarter 2019 till the next couple of years before we even heard the word COVID pandemic. And so it seems to me, like based on this document, that the EU was already preparing for a roadmap. I mean, they call it a roadmap for vaccine passports and documents. So even before we heard the words COVID, these plans were already in the works. I think that's worth mentioning. And they're now planning to expand this to be a global thing. Fun
Yeah,
stuff.
I think it's interesting because part of that where they say they learned and they have to do more to keep everyone safe. In the beginning, I kind of just waited patiently, but I think it's kind of like a beater saying, you got to stay with me because keep you safe from all those other people. Like really, I'm gonna keep you safe.
It is. I mean, I've seen people kind of draw that comparison and look at the relationship, the involuntary, non-consensual relationship between the people and the government, and it's like these are all signs of a narcissist, of somebody manipulating you, abusing you, trying to mess with your head. So that's their tactics, right? The carrot or the stick, and we saw that during COVID, right? We'll give you lap dances and free donuts and free pizzas and this and that, or you can't go anywhere.
Well, you got the already people that already played the game the first time around. Some did that and then kind of saw through it because a lot of info came out, honestly, because reality asserts itself, right? And so you'll have some people that played the game the first time around because they were scared or whatever that won't play it the next time around. But you'll have some people that because they played it, whether they thought about it or not, probably those who didn't think much about it but just reacted, they're going to double down. They're going to want, they're going to be more, fanatical. They're going to be more partisan. They're going to be more, like a vigilant individual trying to convert everyone, or prosecute or make them wear their masks or whatever the new thing is, so yeah, those people will be there waiting to do their bidding as they shout out from the top, panic, we need you to get everybody in line for us because we don't have the ability to do it ourselves. Just because we have all this money and power doesn't mean we have any friends, so it's just kind of sad.
Yeah, like I said, with the pandemic treaty situation, I mean, I feel like in some ways all we can kind of do is watch because, I mean, obviously go out there, spread information. If you're in the EU, protest this. But I do think, again, the World Health Organization, there's a lot of moving parts here. They're working on a treaty, an accord, changing international health regulations that the vote's supposed to happen in May 2024. And if that goes through a certain way, it could end certain levels of national sovereignty, or at least allow this globalist organization to step over some bounds that have previously never been stepped over. And at the same time, that same organization's working with the EU, which many people have long suspected was part of a move towards kind of globalist unions, North American Union, South American Union, European Union, working together to push out vaccine digital certificates as a model for the world. So those two things coming together don't seem to really bode well for the future of travel, privacy, things like that. And it's really, like I said earlier, I mean, I think it is terrifying. We're trying to talk about it, bring it to your awareness. We're not trying to say live your life in fear, but if you are concerned about these things, I think at this moment, what we can do is tell people, like, there's definitely more and more, I think, of a call of exit the WHO. You know, the U.S. should stop funding it. I don't know if we'll see that, right? But I think those are conversations worth having. And we got a few more stories, Micah. We're already an hour in. I know you had a couple you want to pull that you had pulled up. I pulled up. I don't know if you want to go into either one of these. You mentioned the Bill Gates one. I got that up. And then this one, I don't know if this is recent or new, but the IRS, Supreme Court, that sounds like worth talking about. Either of these or anything else? I know you had a couple.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Let me just talk for a sec. Some of those stories I kind of was like, yeah, we ought to mention them, and some of them it was kind of like, let's just get into them briefly. But yeah, so I saw on this one from the IRS, that one was pretty interesting. It's taken my machine a moment to open, but nonetheless, it turns out that it's a new situation, and we've talked about how they've hired so many more agents, etc. But the new situation boils down to this, is that they can basically get into your documents without noticing you. So you can't contest whether they have right to your papers or not. What happened to the Fourth Amendment, right? I mean, so that's pretty interesting. And so,
I mean, just right off the bat, it sounds insane. I mean, obviously there's details in there, but like you said, I mean, the article's saying that they don't have to notify the third party if they're going through your stuff.
Yeah, well, they don't have to notice you. So
so if you're the third party and the IRS is investigating you, or you're
if you're the third party is, say, someone you did business with and the IRS is investigating you, so they can go to your dry cleaner, for example, and ask for all your dry cleaning history. Yeah, they can go, and they're going to have to provide it. They could go, I don't know, to Netflix and ask, or Hulu, and ask for your rental history. Basically, they can go to any third party, not you, and ask for anything. And see, before they used to have to notice you. And I'll read that part of it. It says an important distinction that the Supreme Court made in the case is that the IRS may issue a summons to help determine taxes due, but it must provide notices to do so. But if the summons is to help collect that balance, no notice is required. The decision to help the agency in collecting unpaid taxes in two ways. First, taxpayers or their associates can't squash a request because they don't even know that request exists. And second, ill-intentioned debtors can't move their assets under someone else's name. So, I mean, it's speaking about it kind of in a positive way, but what sometimes happens in tax collections causes taxpayers to start to do creative things, so that the money is not in the same name. So that they're saying that's the reason that they have to try to get in here and do things without letting you know. The whole drama actually began when an IRS agent suspected this guy named Polselli, a taxpayer who they say owed him $2 million. They suspected he was hiding assets under different business ventures that he had. The officer turned to his law firm, where he had long been a client, and basically unsuccessfully requested documentation, including invoices, billing statements, canceled checks, and wire transfers. Think about that. In the name of collecting taxes, they can go ask your lawyer for all your invoices, billing statements, So it's back to that thing, like getting up in your business. The officer then summoned banks for financial records concerning him, his wife, and his law firm. The law firms filed a federal suit to block the request after learning about the summons from their banks. However, the court concluded that because no notice was required, the law firm therefore could not block the request. So as a third party, you won't have any room to say no when the IRS asks you about, transaction history with just one of your customers.
Yeah. You know, this reminds me of a similar tool that the government has given itself. I don't know if it specifically applies to the IRS, but it's, and we don't have to get too deep into it, but just for anybody who's curious, look up something called national security letters. I wrote some articles about it years ago and put it in my documentary, The Modern Surveillance State. It's just a new number of tools that the FBI has. That's what it is, from the FBI. And so it's similar in the case of what you're describing, Micah, that if they come to someone saying like, hey, we're investigating something, or you're under investigation, and we're going to go to the lawyer or whoever and request data, that person is immediately sent this national security letter. And from that point, the law says that they can't even tell a lawyer about it, like, let alone try to like fight back, like they under potential punishment and them being, going to prison and things like that. So I followed this because I met some people, or can correspond with some people who went to prison based on national security letter violations. And I believe there's still court cases playing out with it. And that's what this reminds me of, just another tool that the state has that most people are not even aware of, that gives them access to people's data.
A massive fishing expedition, right? Yeah, just that paragraph you have there says it can ask like your dry cleaner's bank, not your dry cleaner, but your dry cleaner's bank. See what I'm saying? So not even the dry cleaner knows that all their financial records were just, exposed.
And that's what I'm saying, like that line right there where it says the shop owners are powerless to object to the collection request. That's what reminds me of national security letters, because like the legal battle to even get to the point of somebody who I don't think they've even said his name out loud, because technically the law is you can't say who's under a national security letter. Somehow this guy, I think what I remember, it's been a while since I researched this, that he went to a lawyer, and a lawyer immediately was like, I can't help you with this. Like, I'm going to go get in trouble just for reading this, and eventually found a lawyer that was willing to work with him and say, hey, this law, we have no idea what the law is supposed to be here. This guy can't even tell anybody. I could be in trouble just for him telling me about his case. It's pretty extreme, and it may not be the exact same scenario with this IRS thing, but it sounds very similar in terms of no recourse. And yeah, you mentioned Fourth Amendment earlier. Things like this to me are why I really just have no faith in the idea that you could vote a president in on the federal level, or even down to the local level, and really make these deep changes when there's tools like this and things like this that are just happening, which would appear to be clear violations of
the dry cleaner's Fourth Amendment rights. Your dry cleaner is taking over the coals because the IRS is after you.
But these things are just, how many times is this happening now? It's just crazy, man. These are just nuts stories.
It'll stop people from putting money that's not in their name.
Yeah. Very sad that like you mentioned earlier, that we've been covering the sort of buildup and the Biden administration adding 80,000 plus employees, and then talking about giving potentially there's like we talked about the one with some agents are going to have weapons now, and just there's definitely more powers going to the IRS. Yeah,
they got a lot of data they're going to be going through with this new law. This new power, basically a power.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll show this one. We don't have to really get into it, but just as Micah mentioned, in case anybody didn't know what we were referencing, Bill Gates being reported to go meet Xi Jinping, the president of China, or I think they call him president, the ultimate ruler, this Friday, visiting China. So maybe already happening. Marking Xi's first meeting with a foreign private entrepreneur in years. And as we mentioned, Bill Gates, through not only Microsoft, but also through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has had a relationship with China, and I've written about this some as well. And I think there's a lot more we can go into maybe in next week's show. There's like China's doing some just, this maneuvering of this, what they're calling the multipolar world, but, China and Russia, the U.S., this kind of fear, saber rattling, but China developing things like the Belt and Road Initiative, what they call the Global Development Initiative, the BRICS. Like, there's a lot of big moves being made in the favor of those countries. Not saying the U.S. is just going to disappear overnight or anything, but there's some moves being made, and maybe Bill Gates is hearing or feeling which way the wind's blowing. What do you think about this, Micah?
Yeah, I think, he's a power guy. He wants to move out there and get his little experiments and everything going wherever he can. So I think he's kind of pro-authoritarian, but I could be wrong about that.
He definitely said that he thought China was the model, and so did the World Health Organization, like the zero COVID lockdown policy. He was all about that.
Yeah. One story I'd like to make sure we just spend a little bit of moment on, I think it's interesting, is the J.P. Morgan there one with Epstein. It has a lot of different nuance to it, and it's one of those ones kind of like the one that opened the door to universal basic income. It seems like one thing on the surface, but as you get going, you can kind of wonder about a few other things. So yeah, let's go real quick into it. So it turns out that there's a 290 million. That's practically a third of $1 billion. The proposed, let's see, where'd that go? It just disappeared. 1 sec. Yeah, so yeah, this proposed deal between J.P. Morgan and some of Epstein's victims, it would settle a lawsuit that was filed November in Manhattan federal court. And the woman who sued it or started it is unidentified, and it was on behalf of victims who were sexually abused by Epstein for over 15-year period when they were teenage girls and young women. At least that's the allegation in the suit. J.P. Morgan President Jamie Dimon said in the deposition and said he never really heard much about Epstein and all that stuff. The number of victims could potentially rise to more than 100. Nonetheless, obviously Jamie Dimon and crew decided to pay $200 million. Meanwhile, J.P. Morgan still faces another lawsuit by the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, this one gets a little more thick. The suit remains the biggest outstanding Epstein-related case after years of lawsuits against Epstein's estate and Maxwell's conviction in 21. Epstein, it basically for sex trafficking. The lawsuit filed by victims claimed that J.P. Morgan ignored repeated warnings that Mr. Epstein had been trafficking teenage girls and young women for sex, even after he registered as a sex offender and pled guilty in 2008 Florida case to soliciting prostitution from a teenage girl. The complaint said the bank had overlooked red flags in Epstein's case because it valued him as a wealthy client who had access to dozens of even wealthier people. The same lawyers for Epstein's victims negotiated $75 million settlement last month with Deutsche Bank, which succeeded J.P. Morgan as Mr. Epstein's primary banker. Deutsche ended its relationship with Epstein in 2018, paid a $150 million fine to New York regulators in 2020 over allegations that it failed to sufficiently police its financial dealings with the disgraced financier, among other compliance failures. A couple things I'd just like to say about this. I'm kind of blown away. I'm not trying to say that Epstein is like any sort of outstanding citizen or anything like that. And obviously he had more going on than anybody that's just a normal person knew. But all of a sudden, like, you can't have bank accounts because you were a sex offender? I'm not sure where we go with this, So this story, although I'm like totally against Epstein abusing people and making money and wondering, obviously in trafficking, they could be trafficking with money, right, through these accounts. So that sort of inspection, or what do you call it, due diligence to hunt for the trail and who was sending money, that sort of thing. Yeah, do that stuff. After all, these banks have every sort of extra benefit empowerment from the government, so they should have to comply with the government when it's after someone who violated hundreds of young girls, if not more, right? So I'm all about that. But then there's part of me that's just like, how was a person supposed to exist if they just couldn't go to a financial institution? So where do you draw the line? They say felons can't have a gun, you could have a felony for all kinds of things, They say these different people, and I understand that obviously you don't want someone who's convicted of a violent crime to perhaps have a gun and all that stuff, but I don't think these are as clear and cut as they seem. I think there's a lot more issues in there. But also, I got to ask everybody, what does it mean when J.P. Morgan lets Epstein through all these different ones, right, in the Virgin Islands? Also, I must say a part I skipped. One of their retorts to being sued in the Virgin Islands suit was that the Virgin Islands, the government of the Virgin Islands, was all down with Epstein too. So who are they to bring any sort of and support these people who are suing them there? But I got to ask you, if J.P. Morgan Chase is bailed out by the government, who's really paying all this money out to the victims of Epstein?
Well, it's always going to come back to the taxpayer. I think that's the worst part about it at all. I do think that for me, and I think this is kind of the implication, is that Epstein was laundering whatever money he was making, or the people he was working with, from Lex Wexner and others, and the intelligence connections he had. That there was some kind of funny business, and I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of that. Of course, I mean, Whitney Webb wrote a pretty deep book about the whole Epstein network and how it has connections to going back to like Chicago crime, mafia families, and New Orleans and others. Like, it's definitely, there's some shady stuff going on. I think that's the general argument, is that these banks, he was moving lots of money through there that they knew. And even after, that's the main thing, is it was after his 2005 arrest and 2008 conviction. And then there's the another one, I don't know if this article mentioned it, but JP Morgan themselves, like Jamie Dimon too, they're kind of throwing one of their main guys under the bus, Staley or something like that, and claiming, oh, he's the one who knew. Jamie Dimon's playing totally stupid, didn't know anything, even though emails seem to indicate otherwise. But I do think that overall, what comes to my mind, besides what you said about like, yeah, it's going to come down to the taxpayers paying this, is that this is a settlement before we actually got to a court case, which would have revealed more information. And Jamie Dimon was just deposed just in the last week or two. So I think it's kind of interesting. Like, the case was moving forward. People are being deposed. Information's coming out to the media. Somebody's leaking stuff to the mainstream press about kind of behind the scenes stuff with JP Morgan and them throwing under their previous CEO under the bus. And then this announcement of a settlement, which obviously means there's not going to be any further court hearings or a trial or anything, to see what maybe could have come out, to find out the answers to your question, Micah, about like, because I don't think, generally speaking, anybody should just have their accounts just taken away or monitored, or however you want to look at that. But the suspicion, I think it's a fair assumption, or fair at least suspicion, is that his trafficking and the money moving through there is all related. And now we won't know, because there's not going to be any further. There's just going to be taxpayer money funded to the victims.
Because there should still be, separate from the civil case of the $290 million, there should be criminal pursuit of individuals who were procuring illegal services from this person who's dead now, right? I mean, there should be a trail. I mean, there's got to be a trail, even if it's going to a coin exchange or something in the long run.
This is the one big thing I've seen people saying, and there's lots of memes, of course, online about it, but I think it's become like a refrain because of the common sense nature of the request, which is, where's the Epstein client list? If he's trafficking people, he's involved with this. Well, he wasn't just trafficking to himself. Who are the clients? Who are the people that were, and of course, again, there's been a lot. We have directions we can look at, Prince Andrew, et cetera, others, but and people who've paid out settlements, but we're never going to get the bottom of this, unfortunately, it feels like. And this is just one more step in that direction. So, good for the victims, good for them to hopefully get some funds that might help them feel better with whatever they went through. But again, the taxpayers will lose, and the truth loses, because now we're going to miss out on, unless somebody with inside info related to Jamie Dimon or Staley or just JP Morgan themselves leaks the data, it's not going to come out through court hearings now.
Yep, no doubt. That's about all I got. The Unabomber died in prison, and Soros is passing his empire on to his son. So.
Well, let me wrap up with one here that we'll pick up on a thread we've been pulling for years now, the fluoride story. Guys, thanks to everybody who's been with us this whole show. We've been at it now for over an hour, almost an hour and a half, and we know we've covered a lot of information. As we mentioned earlier, all of the sources for this entire show are listed at thehoustonfreethinkers.com. We put the articles we cover. You can go in, read them for yourself, and make your own conclusions. This one is related to a new document dump that has come out as part of the ongoing fluoride lawsuit that I've been covering here on this show since 2020. It has been it's been now given a new court date, January 2024. And in the meantime, the Fluoride Action Network, who's suing the EPA, they have been filing more documents with the court. And one of these documents is a set of emails that they got via public records request in California. And these emails come from California's state dental director, Dr. Jayath Kumar, where it's pretty astounding, Micah. Like, this story, I don't think it's that difficult to follow. It can get a little in the weeds, but all people really need to know, and what we're going to highlight here, is that these emails specifically show this gentleman that we're showing on screen, Dr. Kumar from California, state dental director, clearly trying to just encourage the peer reviewers in this study that he eventually got published after being rejected several times for being biased, trying to change the conclusions, changing graphs and data to try to fit a conclusion that they had already wanted to arrive at, which is that fluoride does not have an association with lower IQ in children, which is what has been found in the last couple years and through these recent reports that we've been covering here on the show. You can go back and see previous episodes about that. But this doctor, this dental director, says that this is not accurate. And so let's get into it. The emails, again, they come from his personal emails, California State Dental Director, and relate to a now published meta-analysis, which is in the journal Public Health, which claims that fluoridated water does not have an association with lower IQ in children. This is one of the most recent studies that have come out, which appears to contradict the previous studies that have been coming out, which showed the exact opposite. And so the government in recent hearings has tried to point and say, hey, look, this is most recent data, Judge. Don't use those old studies. Look at this. We found a study that shows fluoride safe. And these emails give us some insight into that process of Dr. Kumar, who is one of the authors. The emails, again, they come from Fluoride Action Network, and they have been shared with the U.S. government agency, which is at the heart of this whole battle, the National Toxicology Program. And the emails, let's get into the details of what they say. Kumar told his colleagues that his aim was to, quote, preempt the NTP, which is the agency trying to make a final decision about whether it believes fluoride causes toxicity and lower IQ in kids. He says he's going to preempt the NTP and show that fluoridated water is safe. In his email to his co-authors, he emphasized the urgency of this task because, again, he was trying to get this published while this trial is going on. The Fluoride Action Network also shows through the emails that Kumar's paper was rejected 4 times before being published, with one peer review describing the study as superficial, unbalanced, and misleading. According to the Fluoride Action Network, the emails show the peer reviewer referring to misinformation in the study and worrying that it will, quote, fuel more controversy rather than stimulate prudent science-based decisions. So again, his study being called superficial, unbalanced, and misleading. Then we have further emails, one dated March 5th, 2022, when again, he did an analysis that did not reach the conclusions he wanted. He asked the study's biostatistician saying to him, these results are, quote, opposite of what we hoped for. In response to this, the statistician said to him that they could try different models to see if they might reach different results. He said, quote, although hard, we can test more models to try to identify a threshold, a safe level, that can lead to a non-significant fluctuation in IQ before the threshold and a significant drop in IQ after the threshold. So basically trying to say, like, hey, we can make it where, you know, the level, the threshold safe level, which is what the government claims is fluoride is safe, that there's a non-significant fluctuation.
Non-significant drop is a drop.
It's still a drop, right? Like, he's like, we can make it seem non-significant, and then after that threshold, there will be a drop. And, you know, we can say, yeah, there's a drop, but it's after the threshold that we say is safe. So once the decision was made to remove this analysis together, the study concluded, here's the conclusion, these meta-analyses show that fluoride exposure relevant to community water fluoridation is not associated with lower IQ scores in children. The paper was promoted by the American Dental Association, and in fact, even the American Dental Association told the NTP they shouldn't publish their own report, which finds the exact opposite because of this particular paper, which shows you the relevance of it. So behind the scenes, again, this dental director is saying he's going to preempt the NTP report. He's going to try to get conclusions here that are not what it appears to show, what their own data shows. One of the peer reviewers called the work superficial, unbalanced, and misleading, even referring to it as misinformation, saying it would fuel more controversy. And this paper does eventually get published. It's been published now, and the Fluoride Action Network, as I mentioned, has turned these emails over to the court and to the NTP just to say, hey, by the way, that study that some people are telling you to look into, here's what we found. Here's the California State Dental Director, who I will say I emailed looking for a comment for this article. He has not responded, but if he does, I will update the show with whatever he says. My guess is he's not going to be in a hurry to answer for what his private emails appear to show. And as somebody said here, it's all data cooking. I do think that's one thing is people need to think not only just in terms of COVID-19, but things like climate change and other stuff. I mean, you make your own decisions, but I'm just saying if somebody's whole argument's based on computer models, just know that those things aren't just cooked independently without bias and coming down from on high. It's like there's bias that can be cooked into there. There's ways to interpret, to slice the graph, to slice the model, and to make it fit a conclusion. And I think that's this case. What do you think about that, Micah? Surprised at all to see the behind conversation? I think these things are revealing because, again, we're told peer review process, right? Like, that's the standard, this and that. And then here's a conversation of him behind the scenes like, hey, guys, we need to hurry up. I got to preempt this report.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's interesting that, like, the initial reviews of it and how it took so long, like, to even get his book or whatever, because it was so full of problems. Yeah, no.
Hopefully more people will hear about this story. I mean, I wrote about it here for The Last American Vagabond. I saw Children's Health Defense do a report on it. The Fluoride Action Network's promoting it. But these stories aren't really getting the traction that I personally think they deserve. In the last couple months here on this show and through my articles, we've shown emails highlighting how Rachel Levine, the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, blocking the release of a report. Then another health director saying, no, it was me. Either way, both of them should be controversial. Hey, health director blocks report that says fluoride lowers IQ in children. Now we have a California state dental director in emails trying to, fit the predetermined conclusion. In my mind, this should be front page, New York Times, whatever sort of trusted outlet people might believe in, because this is a 70-year-old policy that people have been convinced is one of the greatest medical achievements of the 20th century. And every major city is promoting it, has it in the water. People are showering in it, drinking it, etc. And this is just, and also because, it's this topic that I know that we've talked about for years, and it's one that will get you called crazy, but there's reports like this that are just not getting the attention they need. And so people are like, oh, you sound like some conspiracy theorist, Dr. Strangelove or whatever.
He said he gets paid. Is that right? He gets paid to promote.
Oh yeah, exactly. He's definitely he's a proponent for water fluoridation in his position, and he benefits from that. Well, yeah, that's what's going on in the world. There's corruption. There's we got the local level Houston race, corrupt people endorsing corrupt people. We got IRS getting stronger, more ability to come into your life. Bill Gates is going to China. World Health Organization is working on pandemic treaty and digital COVID vaccines certificates, and there's fluoride in the water, and the doctors and dentists are lying about it. It's a fun world out there. So we're going to end with a song from Total Chaos called Welcome to the New World Order. Mike, anything else you want to wrap up with? I mean, our website, thehoustonfreethinkers.com. Guys, find us. Thanks for the interactions.
Thanks everyone who's bothered to come and enjoy talking about this stuff, because there is a certain enjoyment, not in the negativity, but in the ability to recognize what's going on in the analysis and share that information with others, so that we don't feel isolated, because otherwise the repeaters and all the headlines will make you think that you're odd just for not wanting to still wear a mask or something. I don't know. So bless you people, and take care of your loved ones and yourself. We'll see you next chance we get.
See you guys soon. Stay tuned. Again, find us at thehoustonfreethinkers.com. Live free, think free on all platforms. This is Total Chaos. Welcome to the New World Order. We'll see you next week.
Disorder, death instructions all in fact. confused, blinded, take me